is that these quote unquote Judeo-Christian values that they grow up on aren't even like Christian or Judeo-Christian values to begin with.
Right. They say America's a Christian country, but the founding fathers specified John Adams Treaty Tripoli 1797 said America's not a Christian country.
Thomas Jefferson, if I'm not mistaken, he used to actually walk around with like a Quran, you know, the whole topic of the age of Aicha, radiallahu anha, right?
Fine. You're constantly debating. What do you think holds people back the most, and what do you see come up the most?
Well, in terms of what comes up the most, I think that one's fairly obvious. It's really, you know, the whole topic of the age of Aisha radiallahu anha, right? And generally speaking, it's more so like to do with like morals and stuff, right? And the way that I like to do things in my life, right? When I talk to a lot of people, I don't really like to talk about the issue specifics, right? I like to sort of get them to an understanding where like, you know, okay, we have these set of morals, okay, and it's coming from said religion, all right? The only reason why we would accept any set of morals is if it's the case that it's backed by something that's true, right? And if we substantiate it as being true, then there's no reason for you to actually be rejecting it. And then you could get into like, you know, sometimes obviously we get into the nitty gritty details. We explain to them like different things about criterias and all of these things. And ultimately it's, you know, it usually ends well for me in terms of explaining it to people who actually want to understand it and learn. And obviously there's, you know, trolls and stuff like that that don't really like care. They just kind of want to like throw it out there. Oh my God, like you're a prophet, this, that. So it's really, it comes down to the morals thing. And a lot of the times too, when it comes to the morals thing, I think it's also just, you know, a difference of growing up as well, right? Growing up here in America, obviously our morals are going to be very different. Like Western morals are very different than, you know, Islamic morality, or even, you know, if we're really going to get into it, like Christian morality or Jewish morality and all of these things. And a lot of people don't really realize that to begin with, is that these quote unquote Judeo-Christian values that they grow up on aren't even like Christian or Judeo-Christian values to begin with. It's just kind of like secularized values.
Mm-hmm. Right. They say America's a Christian country, but the founding fathers specified John Adams Treaty Tripoli 1797 said America's not a Christian country. The founding fathers, a lot of them rejected the Trinity. A lot of them were Freemasons, and they had a lot of doubts about the church.
Funny you mentioned that as well. What's his name? Thomas Jefferson, if I'm not mistaken. He used to actually walk around with like a Quran because he very, very much highly valued like, you know, the law system and the jurisprudence that Islam had laid out within the Quran to begin with. I don't think he really identified as a Christian to begin with. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, he was.
I think he was more so a theist, if anything. But he definitely wasn't a Trinitarian. He didn't believe in, you know, three persons, one God, and all of these different things. And I think, you know, a lot of people to begin with don't really believe in that stuff, but that's a different conversation.
So yeah, listening to the new debaters like yourself and Cora and Muslim Orthodox Libiano, it is sometimes intimidating. It's like, oh, I really got to study more, and I've been going to more classes every day. But what do you recommend the young Muslim do to become more educated in a time where they're trying to subvert education and the AI is going to delete books and erase history? How can we properly arm ourselves intellectually?
Well, that's actually a very good question. That's kind of one of the beauties of Islam and the beauties of the methodology in which Islam came to us to begin with, is that we don't actually rely upon these like written things to begin with, right? Deleting the books, even like, you know, maybe you've heard of like that little statement before where like if all the religious books in the world got deleted, you know, the Quran would be the first one to be able to be completely replicated again.
Right.
And it's very true. And that's due to the methodology that many of the scholars went by, right? Is that it's not, they weren't relying on just like the written manuscripts or anything of the sort for these books. Rather, they were memorizing many of the things when it comes to the Quran, Hadith, even the sayings of their own teachers and stuff. And this is how these things were passed down. People would sit in lectures. They would study under imams, and then they would get their, you know, their certificate or ijaza from these said imams or scholars or anything of the sorts, right? So for my personal, you know, advice for somebody who wants to learn is definitely learn under somebody who's of knowledge, right? Me and as well as the other brothers and sisters definitely don't claim to be people of knowledge, but we're definitely like, you know, available to answer whatever questions we you know, could answer if it's possible, you know.
And I want to ask you about the feminist Muslim girl. I mean, TikTok, I'm sure you've seen it. This is a phenomenon that is very new. I'm seeing, you know, some feminist girls reject hadith and they say things like hadiths are memes and stuff. Obviously, this doesn't represent all, but with Western influence, things can get subverted a lot. What do you advise people do to stay away from feminism?
Well, look, when it comes to that topic in specific, I was actually working on a video like that earlier, but when it comes to the topic in general, I think it's not really to do with feminism. I don't really think it has to do with rejecting hadith either, because I think a lot of them would even reject verses of the Quran. I was literally listening to a live yesterday, and this girl is like, somebody brought her a hadith, but in reality, he was reading her a Quran verse, and she just like flat out rejected it. So it's like they don't even care about where it's coming from. It's just like, if it doesn't sound good to them, they're like, oh, well, wait a minute, I don't know about that. But it's more of like, I'll put it this way, right? It's a lack of discipline, right? Discipline in terms of learning what it is that Islam really is, meant to portray, right? It's a lack of distancing oneself from that which is going to sort of corrupt them. I guess you could put it that way, right? And what I mean by that is more so these sort of ideology. Like if you really pay attention to a lot of these algorithms, right? What is it really pushing out? It's not pushing out Islamic content. It's not pushing out anything like that, right? It's really pushing out like a lot of these people who are either, like I said, they're clubbing, they're doing this, they're doing that, and it's sort of I guess you could say putting it on a pedestal type thing. That's the type of lifestyle that you should strive for and aim for. And then we see people who sort of fall into this, this person's having so much fun with their life, and I'm sitting here and I'm not doing anything, and I'm, restricted by XYZ. And then it becomes a comparison war for the person, right? These girls get to do this. And it goes back to that other question you asked me about the hijab too. These people are doing this and I can't do this because I'm Muslim, right? But in reality, when you look at what Islam offers, right, it's offering firstly protection of oneself, right, your mindsets, your familiar rights, so like preservation of the family, all of these different things. Whereas all of these other things, they don't do that, right? It's just like this sort of picturesque type of thing that people are trying to display to get, at the end of the day, it's all for money, right? But that's again, like that's something that goes very, very in depth.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you your favorite hadith, especially if you find one that applies to women. But first, I want to explain mine. Of late, I read one. I'm reading Sahih Bukhari right now, and it's in the beginning. I think it's the Book of Knowledge. There's a hadith where the women are going up and they're kind of nagging Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. They're saying, "Oh, you're giving all these talks to men all the time. You don't give us any attention." And so it's like, "Okay, I'll give you one talk a week." And during the talk, he's explaining things. There's a Q&A. And then one of the women asks, well, what happens to women that have children that pass away? And Prophet Muhammad, he says that if you have 3 children that pass away, they will shield the mother from the hellfire. And I really love that. And they continue to ask him. And then another woman asks Prophet Muhammad, what about 2? And he says, even 2. And it just shows the mercy of Allah and how sins can be forgiven. And even in a time of calamity, imagine the women at the time, a lot of war. There were, the Arabs at the time of the Jahiliyyah days were burying their children and doing disgusting things. And so they revert. And imagine the sadness that the mother is having, but the mercy that they can find in Islam, that even 2 children, if they can shield her from the hellfire. I love the hadith.
MashaAllah. No, I definitely, I know which one you're talking about. Mine is honestly not very detailed as much as yours is, but it's one that my dad constantly reminds me of whenever I do these types of lives, because like I said, there's a lot of like people that come on here and stuff and they say things that maybe will rile somebody up in a sense. It's 2 words, la taghdab, right? Don't get angry, right? Or it's sort of like the Prophet, peace be upon him's way of saying, the best thing that you could do in a situation is to stay calm, right? And that's something that I really try and strive towards doing whenever I give my dawa, or even just if I interact with my family, my cousins, my sister, my brother, anything of the sort. I try very much to start practicing this idea of patience and calmness, and not really letting my emotions overtake me overall. So it's a very simple one, but I think it's a very important one that a lot of us tend to miss out on in terms of our daily lives. So
100%, especially when you have to interact with the kuffar. It's the perfect example of how they want you to be miserable with them. Misery loves miserable company. Yeah. So you have to always strive to be better than that. I make this mistake all the time. I'm ranting and I'm interacting. I have to get better at that 100%. I want to ask you one more and leave you with this one.